Hello, good evening. Um, Hello from Bucharest, where we are following the election night with some fellow European campaigners who I am about to introduce to you right now. The first one is my very good friend Dennis, who just dropped from the call, probably some technical issues. But the whole idea of connecting tonight was to put together a group of campaign people, communications people, who for whatever reason are following the election night in Romania, and to have a chat with them, see how the results of the elections look like. May I remind you that the results will be live in less than half an hour. But what we do know now is that turnout for this election is one of the lowest in recent history. Of course, COVID has played a role, but there might be other things that we are about to uncover with the help of our guest, who will start joining us in a couple of minutes. So please bear with us. And I will bring those guests to the screen very shortly. See you in a minute. Hello, everyone. This is Sebastian from the European Campaign Playbook, and we are tonight following the results of the. Hello, everyone. This is Sebastian. Sorry. So we are today following the results of the Romanian legislative elections taking place tonight. We are not doing this alone. We have some fellow campaigners with us, and I will start bringing them to the screen as they decide to drop in. The first one of them is my very good fella Denes from Hungary.
Buenas tardes, jó estét kívánok.
You can see, Denes, that I moved to Bucharest to follow the election. The election result.
To the best of my understanding, this is currently the second largest parliament building in the world. At the time, the parliament building in Budapest was the largest one. Then the People's Palace, as it is called, Ceausescu imagined it, became the largest. And since then, the Brazilian parliament is even larger than this. So you're in a really nice neighborhood, Sebastian.
And is it also true that it might be the largest building made of marble? Is that correct?
I have to say, I think we'll have to bring on a campaigner from Romania, from Bucharest, to answer that question. However, I know a fact, which I think is amazing. You have to go on Top Gear. Top Gear did an episode where they were racing cars underneath this parliament. So there is a racing track underneath the parliament. And Ceausescu and his family loved racing sports cars, and this was a way that they could race them underneath the parliament building.
Impressive. We have Sam joining us in a second. While he he's switching on his camera, I want to say to everyone who is following us on social media, please first enjoy the night and be ready to have fun. Second, feel free to drop any questions that you want in the comment sections on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. And if you are watching us and you're having so much fun that you want to join us on the stage, I'm gonna share a link that will take you directly to our conversation. So for any one of you who wishes to do it, please join us. It feels lonely, and it would be great to have a chat with you. The link is I'm gonna post it now using this link. You can have it. You can see it in the comment sections. It should appear in front of you right now. Okay. What can we say, Dennis? Let's kick off with some basic. I can see Sam is joining too, so I'm gonna say hi to him.
Hello.
Hi, Sam. Where are you based at the moment?
I'm still in Brussels for now, but I was just trying to figure my lighting out because it was pretty dark, so I needed to make sure people could see me. So it took a bit longer to go. And I clearly missed the shirt and the navy jumper as well, right? I mean, I missed that one.
Indeed, this is the European campaign playbook official attire. And unfortunately, Sam, you haven't respected the code today.
Yeah, I missed that memo.
Okay.
I see that Sebastian is not respecting the beard rule. So as you can see, all men inside the European campaign playbook must have beards. And Sebastian, I'm afraid you failed the test.
Okay. Really interesting person just joined us. Some of you, I think you will know him. I am not in Bucharest, as you can imagine, but he is in Bucharest, and he's not. He say no. Okay, so he will tell him. He will tell us. Okay, so I'm bringing Narcis.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. So I'm not in Bucharest. I'm in a voting section, but I'm not in Bucharest. I'm in a diaspora voting section here in Denmark, in Aarhus, actually, in the city of Aarhus. So sorry, I can tell you how is the feeling in how is the voting going in the diaspora. I know how it's going back in the country, but I cannot tell you what is the feeling in on the ground in Romania. That I cannot offer you.
I will settle for Denmark because I think it's quite interesting to hear from you for two reasons. One, because the turnout seems to be one of the lowest in recent history, and because I can see I follow activists and campaigners on social media, and there are like some complaints about how difficult it is to vote abroad. I know this is I mean, in Spain it happens too. It's very difficult to vote abroad, but I could see them quite angry. So what's going on?
Well, I think that's feelings from other elections. It's not difficult anymore to vote abroad for Romanians. For example, in Denmark, 2 years ago, we used to have 1 or 2 voting sections only. Now, since last year, we have 12 voting sections. Well, this time we only have 10 because too few people showed up to vote last time. But still, 10 voting sections spread all over the country in good locations with a lot of people operating at the same time. So at least 7 to 8 people can vote in the same time. So I wouldn't say there's a difficulty to vote. We didn't have any lines. So nobody spend more than 30 seconds or 1 minute in the voting section, you know. So yeah, I don't understand, or I didn't see anyone being angry about being unable to vote, and I don't think that's a reason for a low turnout.
Okay, so what do you think is the reason?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
Probably I'm on Can you hear me?
Yeah, it was just people passing by. So,
what do you think the reason is? Is it COVID? Is it apathy? What are we talking about here?
this is a combination, you can say, of three main reasons. One, yes, it is the pandemic. There are people who think that, okay, voting is not more important than my own health. And they don't really have some issue or some politician they really burn or they are willing to put everything on the line for. So they don't have someone to motivate them in such a way that they will not think more about their own personal health than about using their right to vote. Second of all, we're talking about the voting presence in diaspora, which is it's quite low, as you said in the beginning. The reason is also that people don't really understand the parliamentary elections. They understand the presidential ones because they know there's only 2 or 3 candidates who stand out. Everyone knows those 2, 3 people, and they can easily make a choice between A, B, or C. Now you have lots of parties with lots of names that nobody knows who they are. What are they standing for? I mean, if you ask someone who comes and votes and looks on the voting ballot, they wouldn't be able to recognize even 2, 3 names out of that voting ballot, and that's problematic, you know. So it's more of about voting the party and the reputation behind that party. It's not really voting the person this time, at least in diaspora. Just so to make it clear. Another reason is that a lot of people showed up to vote in the past because they were motivated by the rise of a new party, about USR Plus and the rise of this Renew Europe party. Unfortunately, the party didn't really deliver on the promises it made, and a lot of its very active members from diaspora who used to mobilize hundreds and thousands of people to vote didn't bother this time. They themselves lost this interest in the party, and with them, obviously, because if you don't have those very active people who will be willing to put in the time on the street, who will be willing to put in their own to prioritize the party over everything, if you disappoint those people, you're going to lose a much larger number than just those people. It's not just about 10 or 100 people that you lost, very active soldiers. It's about that those 100 people, they can motivate 100,000 themselves, and that's their power. And if you're going to disappoint them, that is problematic. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people didn't show up today, because they normally showed up for the first time to vote last times because of this party. This party does not seem to be what it used to be, so therefore many of them did not show up again. Also, the presence could have been a lot worse, but there is this new party, because in the vacuum left by USR Plus, there was a new toxic party which appeared, a party with far-right tones, sponsored directly by Kremlin, called Gold. Literally, it's called Gold. Like, you couldn't go more bling bling with this party. Yeah, but this party managed to gather a lot of very extremist people, a lot of shady people under its wings, but it managed to really appeal to the pain of those lower class Romanians that are abroad. People that do not really enjoy being abroad or are not really in a great place where they are, and they really needed to hear those messages. They really play them on these nationalist messages that usually were in that direction. Usually USR Plus used to say something about, but because those people who used to speak to them didn't do it anymore, a new party came in and tried to speak to them. And some people actually listened to this new party, this new hope, as they call it. A lot of people I saw today who were saying, like, I was talking to them outside of the voting section afterwards, and they were saying they are voting for this new party and this new savior who came to really somehow bring pride back to Romanians. some weird concept of that. I'm not really sure I understand it myself, but yeah.
I don't think any country is immune to the threat of nationalism and populism, and it is true that that it happened all over the place. Like new parties emerge, there is a huge expectations, then they get ruling and being part of a parliament and politics is quite difficult. So the voters who relied on or who really believe in those parties, then they will either stay at home, which happened in Spain, or a portion of that electorate will go to more radical and extremist faction, which is very very worrying. I think, Denej, before you drop off, I think you wanted to intervene. And by the way, like the four of us, let me say, we are the result of the This Time I'm Voting campaign, because in one way or another, the four of us have been involved. So it's great to have all of us together tonight.
Yeah, the pleasure is mine.
And may I say, Narcis, it's really nice to see you. So in Romanian, Noroc, in Hungarian, Egész.
Noroc. I'm not able to drink yet. I have to wait till 9 o'clock until the voting section actually closes, but I can join you later on that.
I'd like to ask you a question, Narcis, which is, you are right now in a diaspora voting booth. I dropped off due to some technical issues. You may have answered this question, but could you confirm that on Europe Elects, they had a post which said that this time, the diaspora vote, in terms of how many people have voted, is the largest ever since 1992. So according to Europe Elects, 107,961 people had voted 9 hours ago when they published this. And this was larger than in 2016, when 106,038 people had voted. At that time, they signaled that voting is still continuing. So could you confirm, Narcis, that this election has become more European in the sense that you have people voting in the Romanian parliamentary elections from all over Europe and all across the European Union?
Well, yes, in a way it's true. We do have a much larger voting presence. We have over 250,000 people who came to vote in diaspora until now. But you have to understand that this is compared to the last elections in 2019, in 2018, it's not that, okay, it's bigger than 2016 because in 2016, the infrastructure to vote abroad didn't exist. It was actually because of what happened in 2016, it kind of forced these changes to the infrastructures, which now allows people to come and vote. So, for example, the last elections in 2019, there was 900,000 people in diaspora who voted. So 200,000, not even a few months later, it's not that much, it feels a bit too large of a gap, if you understand what I mean. So yes, it is more European. Yes, Romanians from all over are voting for these elections, and it became now quite of a presence when Romanians are voting somewhere. Like imagine that you have 10 voting sections in Denmark, but you have 40 voting sections in Italy, 50 voting sections in Germany. So almost all Europe knows that we are voting somewhere. And especially when we didn't used to have the infrastructure and we had those really long lines in the previous elections, everyone knew we had those elections, like all the local media and the local news, they will be streaming about these long lines around few buildings about what's happening. And it's because the Romanian community has become large enough in a lot of European member states. Now we became quite of an important minority in most of the European member states, well, Western European member states. I don't know if this pleases you, Denis, or you want me to follow up on that.
Narcis, when it comes to campaigning, so you are right now in Denmark. On social media, did you see ads targeted at you trying to convince you, as a member of the diaspora, to vote? And could you talk a little bit about how you saw the different political parties reaching out to you as a diaspora voter?
I mean, do we have an understanding of the only 7 political parties in Romania? I mean, did you go through that in the beginning, or?
No, but it would be a great opportunity to do so. We had prepared several basic information about the election, but then we can come back to that later. So if you could give us a brief intro, that would be great.
Okay, I just have to say that I used to be a member of USR Plus myself, so this could also be seen a bit subjective, not fully objective. So I have to mention this first. But anyway, right now I'm and plus I'm a member of the Social Democrat Party in Denmark, so that also could play some role into what I have to say further. First of all, the exit poll from if we're looking at the exit poll from the last exit poll from 3 o'clock, it seems that we're gonna have the Liberal Party that's right now ruling Romania winning by a very slim margin. We're talking about 32% or something. So we have a liberal conservative party, the national, we call it PNL, the National Liberal Party. It's actually a liberal conservative. It's not truly liberal Renew Europe liberal. It's liberal EPP, if you can find such tonalities of EPP. Then you have the second place party right now with 29%, according to the last exit poll, is PSD, which is the Social Democrat Party, which is basically not really a Social Democrat Party. It's more of a, how to call this, a wild capitalist, mafia-based party, to call it. It does not really have an ideology, to be honest. It doesn't really have an ideology. It copies a lot of ideas from the European family, the European Social Democrat family, but it never adheres by them and it never implements them. So for me, it's very difficult to ever recognize them as a real Social Democrat party or even a left-wing party, because they have very strong nationalist tendencies, and a lot of actually nationalist movements have been born out of this party. So yeah, I would be careful about calling them a really left-wing party. They're standing at 29%. If the voting presence stands under 30%, but it kind of passed already, it's 31%, but anyway, it's still very low voting percent. The analysts are saying that this party might actually win the elections. However, in the same time, we have to consider the fact that the elderly population that usually votes for them didn't really show up to vote this time. There's 1 million less older people who showed up to vote this time. So right now the middle age, it's dominating. So this could actually play in the favor of the first party I said, the Liberals. Also, it's important to mention that the urban vote is much bigger than the rural vote, which also can play a big role in the favor of the Liberal Party. The third party is basically USR Plus, the one that's aiming at 19%, which is the centrist party of Romania, basically like the Renew Europe party, the actual liberal European, as we understand it. And then we have on the fourth place, we have this thing called Pro-Romania, which is basically, the problem with Pro-Romania is that it was built like a new, how to call this, elaborate party, a new social democracy of Romania, but it was a failed project from the beginning, because it was run by a former social democrat that has kind of destroyed its reputation while he was a prime minister. So while the project has healthy basis to become a real left-wing alternative, its own owners or its own creators don't give credibility. So that kind of, all the people, left-wing people like me, for example, cannot see a home into that party. It's not possible, just because of its corruption links, you can say. That's the fourth party. The party hits 8% or something right now, according to the exit poll. And then you have the Gold Party, which is the new far right of Romania, with 6%, barely entering the parliament. Will be the first time in 12 years or even more that we have again a nationalist party in the Romanian parliament. And then we have the Hungarian Minority Party, which is also barely coming in with 5%. And maybe we might have the popular movement of the former president Traian Băsescu, which is also gathering the votes of the Moldavian community, because he has done a lot to try to bring the topic of uniting Republic of Moldova and Romania. And there's a lot of Moldavians who have Romanian citizenship. So we are not actually surprised to see that from the whole diaspora, Republic of Moldova is the only place where the voting presence compared to the previous years has increased. There's actually voting lines. The only place in the whole diaspora where there are lines is in Republic of Moldova, which also means that there's a good chance. No, actually does not mean that, because all the votes from diaspora are fighting for just 6 spots, 4 deputies and 2 senators. That's all they're fighting for. So even if there's 1 million votes in diaspora or is 100,000 votes in diaspora, they only count towards 6 spots. So I guess the only way this party might come into the parliament would be through the diaspora vote from the Republic of Moldova.
And can I just add, Narcis, thank you very much for giving, of course, your own view on these political parties. I really appreciate that you preface your comments by saying that, of course, you are a former member of USR Plus, and also that you are indeed a part of the Social Democratic Party there in Denmark. You mentioned the political party representing the Hungarian community in Romania. And I just wanted to bring in a point here. Of course, this party is the Democratic Alliance of Hungarians in Romania. And what I think is interesting is that this is a community which numbers 1.2 million people, a quite significant voting bloc. And I've seen over the course of this campaign, political parties communicating not only in Romanian, but also in Hungarian. Yes. And you also have to mention that there are other communities. Romania is a very culturally and linguistically diverse country. So, for example, you have the Saxon community, which is German-speaking. The current president, Klaus Johannes, belongs to this community. And I've seen how parties have been communicating in German and in Hungarian. And I think that's a good point that we should keep in mind whenever we're campaigning across the European Union, that when you really want to reach voters who belong to particular linguistic communities, a more effective way to reaching out to them is using their mother tongue, whether that's Hungarian, German, or Romanian.
Okay, I want to. You may have noticed that there is another square here in the screen. That's Emilian, also part of the This Time I'm Voting initial team, and he's still working with the Together.eu, and he's also he's here in a purely in the individual capacity, but he's Romanian himself, and I am pretty sure that he also has a view. I know he has. And Emilian, do you want to take the floor and tell us how do you see it? You mentioned to me on WhatsApp that the turnout was very low, and that was very upsetting to you.
Well, good evening, first of all, and I'm sorry to be late, but duty called, and I hope everything is okay throughout the night. Yeah, well, it's a very almost disturbing result in terms of turnout, and I'm not even sure if I mean, obviously it's too soon to say who will be advantaged of that fact. Clearly, some of the smaller parties will be disadvantaged, like Narcis was mentioning the former president Băsescu. Of course, he won 2 terms as a president, so obviously he still has a lot of supporters in Romania, not only in Moldova. But with this very low turnout, a party like Popular Movement probably will not reach the threshold. Then even the Hungarian minority party is in danger with a very low turnout, because we can assume that people from all over, all the social classes and all the regions somehow were demotivated, or there was some apathy, or I don't know what was, but obviously I'm pretty sure the Hungarians didn't go out to vote either, the Hungarian minority, I mean. So it's dangerous for smaller parties, for sure. Then when it comes to let's call the big boys, the big guys, first look, you might say, okay, the Social Democrats can have it, for them can mean a bounce back after the total failure that meant everything they did after 2016, when they even had a vote of no confidence in their own prime minister. They named it, So somehow the Social Democrats managed to shoot themselves in the leg, not once, but several times in less than 3 years. So probably for them, any score that brings them very close to the liberals, which Nat just pointed out very well, they're not truly liberals. I'll call them more conservative party, not liberals. It's just a name. So any score for the Social Democrats that is close to the liberals definitely is it's a bounce back for them, because they were in a pretty bad position. Then the new boys in town, USR Plus, they will suffer, very likely they will suffer for if there's a lower turnout, but it looks like there's lower turnout in the countryside, which again, it can be in their advantage, because their voters are almost entirely urban. So it's very weird. And right now, personally, and this is very subjective part, and maybe I should not say this, but the Liberal Party, they organized these elections in the middle of a pandemic. And I think it was a big mistake. And I would be very happy for them to be the biggest loser of the evening, to be honest, because it was not the moment to organize elections. And people not going out to vote says that, and that was the first thing when I saw this very low turnout. I said, okay, actually, people punished the authorities for organizing elections in the middle of this. So I'm not sure. It's again smaller parties. It's tough for them because it's if their voters don't come out for them it matters a lot. And for the Social Democrats, it seems like there is a bounce back for them, which is, well, not a very good news, because they won the 2016 elections and they did nothing. They literally killed themselves, themselves. So I'm a bit disappointed, to be honest.
So norok to you as well, Emilian. Thank you very much for joining us. Egészségedre, as we say in Hungarian, and Gesundheit in German. And the reason why I say it in German as well is I would like your input on something that happened in the municipal elections, which I thought was very interesting. Namely, that the city of Timișoara, Temesvar, to name it in the three main languages of the city, Hungarian, German, and Romanian, elected a gentleman by the name of Dominic Samuel Fritz, who is a gentleman who was born in the Federal Republic of Germany. And he came over, moved to the city, and has recently been elected the mayor. So that I thought was a very interesting example of how these campaigns in Romania are becoming more and more European. And I wanted to ask you, were there any outstanding, interesting candidates this election, for this parliamentary election, that you would care to point out?
Okay, it probably not just has a better answer and a more complex answer. For me personally, and this is again part of what I was saying about organizing an election in the middle of a pandemic. It's a legislative, it's not a presidential like United States, so you have two candidates, it's A or B, there we go. But it's the organizing it really killed the appetite of the public. to even look at the candidates. I looked at some of the candidates, and wow, it's sometimes, in particular for social democrats, liberals, they're same old, or not necessarily new faces like Dominic, you were saying. And I'll make a point about Dominic. He won he won Timișoara, and he has supporters, well, call it this way, 800 kilometers on the other side of the country. There are people in my region, in Iași, which is a northeast, who say, oh, that guy is he's a very cool guy. I mean, so it's not necessarily it didn't come by surprise, in my opinion, because he kind of made a name for himself. I don't know. So yeah, it's a charisma, probably. So I see that the Social Democrats, that Sam is chatting there, come out as winners.
Okay, so we have the first exit poll.
Yeah.
So this is Sam. What is the source of the? Just to make sure we.
Yeah. So I just saw this one on Europalex. It's the CURS exit poll, which puts the PSD at 30.5%, which is down 15 points from their previous election. The PNL, the Liberal Party, up 9 points to 29%. USR Plus up 7 points to 15.9%. UDMR at 5.7%. The new party, which Narcis was mentioning, at 5.2%, I believe. And the Pro and PMP both.
Just to mention here, UDMR, this is the Romanian version of the Democratic Alliance of Hungarians in Romania. Narcis and Emilian, please correct me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Unia Democrata Maghiara din România, or in Hungarian, Romaniai Magyarok Democratici.
That is correct. It's Uniunea Democrată Maghiară din România. And they pretty much got their score. That's the usual score of the election. So they're somewhere around 5.5 and 6%. As Narcis said, is the biggest surprise of the elections is that we have a newcomer in there, which is this well, in translation, gold party.
Bling bling.
But let's be cautious, because I could bet now that they don't get to the threshold, because they only have 5.2, and this is an exit poll, and
but we also have. Sorry, Emilian, to intervene, but I just want to say this exit poll came what hour? 7 o'clock?
No, this is the latest. This is the 9 o'clock one.
The 9 o'clock one. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, the 9 o'clock.
That's the 9 o'clock, and I was reading now on the news portal here. So
the idea is that in the 6 spots that we have from diaspora, there is a very, very high chance one of them at least will go for this new party, because actually this party has built up a very, very strong backing in the diaspora, especially Spain, Italy. These 2 areas, there's a lot of voters. Areas like Denmark, who will be 90% for USR plus. Now, from the people I used to speak with outside, just to conversations, at least half of them mentioned they will vote for the Gold Party, which is very unusual for Denmark. So if this happens in Denmark, I cannot even think of what's in Italy and Spain. So I'm just saying at least 1 spot from the diaspora will go for this party. That's my bet. I mean, I may be wrong. I want to be wrong. I truly, truly want to be wrong, believe me. But there is a high chance they will get one of the spots. Another spot will go to PMP. At least 2 spots will go to USR Plus and 2 spots to PNL.
Can I ask, Narcis, based on the current results, what would you expect? Of course, the party with the largest vote share, as I understand it, will be given the mandate to start coalition negotiations. Correct?
Well, if I can, because I'm looking now at the news here on the mobile phone. So, and I told Sebastian, you know, like the liberals can actually lose it to the Social Democrats, and it's a big bounce back for the Social Democrats. On the other hand, everybody. There was a bit of it was floating in the air that the USR Plus, they're going to do, or at least they're going to do the same as for the local elections, and actually they didn't.
They did better.
That's the first loss of the evening. Is definitely if USR Plus stays at 16% or 15 by 9 is in the poll here, it's not a good result for them. I mean, it's a good result for a new.
Better than the locals. Locals was 8.5% only.
Yes, but in locals is a bit different because they won a lot of big cities. So if you balance it by not by percentage, but by big cities, and what they represent, you'd see that their score is amazing.
Okay.
That's what I meant. It's what's the power of a mayor in Bucharest, or what's the power of a mayor in, I don't know, in a little village with 3,000 people? It's obviously the numbers are not. But looking here, I mean, it's not looking good, and it's going to be very feisty in the next weeks, because if the Social Democrats won the election, they will claim to form the government, and the president won't agree with that. So he'll do everything in power not to appoint a prime minister from the Social Democrats.
I know that forecasting how the parliament is gonna look like is quite tricky, because the electoral system is not it's not a straightforward, right? Because you have two cameras. You have the Senate. Are you voting today for the Senate? And then you have the Camera Deputaților, right?
The Chamber of the Senate and the House of Representatives, basically, in translation. Yeah. And both are today, yeah?
Yeah, both.
So the vote was for the two cameras.
And in the Chamber of Deputies, you have something which is always strikes me, which is you have a sort of like proportional representation system, but divided in like 40 different districts, right? Plus the city of.
You can call them voting circumscriptions, basically.
But it's based on the population.
Exactly.
If a county is bigger in population, obviously there will be more representatives for that county.
So it's not that, I mean, knowing you cannot extrapolate these numbers that we see on the screen to the final parliament, because these elections take place in 40 different circumscriptions. I think they are called Judets, right? Am I right? Or Judets?
Plus diaspora. Diaspora is like itself a county.
Exactly. So in order for us to see how the parliament is going to look like, you would need to see pretty much these results being extrapolated in all this. Plus, you have the diaspora, which strikes me, because in Spain, no one represents those who live abroad. Then you allocate seats to minorities, and it's a little bit easier for them to get a seat in the parliament. And then you have something that we, as a party, Ciudadanos in Spain, we are fighting for, which is this very low, very, very high threshold, like this 5% threshold to get at national level, or 20% in at least 4 districts to actually have representation. That is something that we in Spain we are pushing for. And you guys have it. It's 5%. I mean, some people might think that it's very, very hard to get parliamentary seats unless you are you are the diaspora or one of the minorities. So with all that in mind, what are the possible coalitions if more or less this vote gets replicated in the most important districts, plus the people working or living abroad? I mean, who is going to be the socialists trying to forge a government without a majority, or will it be a coalition of many small parties, or many, like we have in Spain, a coalition of multiple small parties that support the government in minority?
Could I try first to answer, Emilian, if you mind? Okay. Well, to be honest, even if this score remains like this, let's just imagine it remains like this with 30% the Social Democrats, 29% the Liberals. You have to understand about another very common phenomenon that happens in Romanian politics, which is moving from one party to another for different reasons. It's a very common thing to happen in Romania. And one thing I know for sure, at this kind of percentages, the Liberals will be getting enough people on their side to keep governing. This is not enough for the Social Democrats to force a government. This, I can guarantee that there is enough people in the Social Democrats willing to switch to the Liberals. And this has happened during the local elections. Thousands of mayors have switched from the Social Democrats to Liberals very easily. And I'm pretty sure they're going to try the same move again. So the new government will, at this kind of percentages, will definitely be again a Liberal government. I mean, conservative, whatever. But you just have to understand that it's not, the Social Democrats simply do not have enough good relations with the other parties to force a coalition of small parties, because the Gold Party, the new one, they attacking them like crazy, and they have such extremist people among their members that if their leaders will even consider going into alliance with the Social Democrats, that will backfire. That will backfire badly. And when you have very, very angry people in your party as party members, you need to be careful what you're doing. You need to be a bit more careful. So I do not see an alliance between the far right and the Social Democrats. Then I do not see an alliance between pro-Romania, which is acting like the new European left in Romania, and the Social Democrats, because if they do that, they are done. That's the end of the party itself, kaput, to say clearly. So what's left is the Romanian movement, the popular movement of Romania. The former president, Traian Băsescu, he also hates quite strongly the Social Democrats, even though they locally have voted often with the Social Democrats. Their leader, their moral leader, in a sense, loves attacking them quite often. So I do not see an alliance between them either. So the Social Democrats simply do not have with who to make an alliance. And if USR Plus will even consider making an alliance with the Social Democrats, I'll be shocked. If that happens, I'll be shocked. And I will just be shocked, to be honest. That's the only way Social Democrats can even consider having a government, is if they USR Plus somehow decides to consider them as a partner. That's what I had to say.
We can already see a coalition preference being voiced by RMDS-UDMR, so the political party representing the Hungarian community in Romania. And I'm going to quote a tweet here sent by Vincel Uran, who is the international secretary of the party. He says, quote, "I voted in Marosvásárhely Târgu-Mureș for the parliamentary elections in Romania to RMDS-UDMR, EPP, representing the 1.2 million Hungarian community. We aim for a stable, center-right government able to develop the country via EU funds and safeguarding minority rights." And here I just want to preface this by saying that I work for him, so that is a bias that I have. And I just want to say here, and I want to drop this to both of you here, that center-right, right? So this would assume PNL, USR Plus, and RMDS-UDMR. Am I correct in making that assumption?
Emilian, you if you want.
Well, there was this big thing about USR Plus, and everybody in their camp, yeah, expected. So their goal was 20%, yeah, 20 and plus.
25, yeah.
No. Their goal was, realistically they said, or we have to take, we have to get 20%. If they're quite, 3% below that their own threshold. So when they said that, they thought about power of negotiation. So with 16%, you don't have that much power of negotiation. Yeah? So US surplus, if they want to get into the government, because a lot of people say, okay, you're a newly formed party coalition and you want to demonstrate, yeah, okay, go and lead, go on power and lead and demonstrate that you're good. If they want to do that, they will need to make a lot of concessions to the liberals. And knowing how this coalition, US surplus, works and what kind of people are forming this coalition and their supporters, I don't believe is going to work, to be honest, because they will be the underdog all in this coalition. For the Hungarian minority party, it's very simple. They have very simple requests, and they did it in the last 25 years. So nobody has. There's no surprise with them. If you want them to support you, you know how to deal with them because there's such a long history. But with the US surplus, these people are not that. I would say are not that. So a lot of them might simply leave the party, just in protest, like elected. I wouldn't be surprised if they get into a coalition with the liberals, and they only get in the coalition, but the liberals run the show totally. I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of people would simply leave US surplus.
And if I could just jump in here, just from a numbers perspective, if you add up the support of PNL, USR Plus, and RMDS UDMR, currently it's at 50.6% of the vote total. So assuming that a coalition government would be formed between these three parties, or a supply and confidence arrangement, which is also a possibility, this would form a stable center-right majority, as said by RMDS UDMR International Secretary.
It's correct, and there is a thing that we didn't mention. There is a system called redistribution. So all the parties, so all the candidates and parties that don't reach the 5%, and in percentage together they can mean something, quite few seats actually, those seats are redistributed. So you have the first place, okay, so there's a system. So obviously the winner of the election will get the most from the redistribution, and the second most, and so on and so forth.
But winner of the election in every circumscription, not nationally, just to make sure.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So
your founding fathers, when they were drafting the constitution and the electoral system, they were probably having a few beers, no?
Yeah, they were probably having a lot of beers. Now it's a very, very nasty aspect. And then you have the minorities, and this is very. I personally, I don't agree because it's not compliant with the democracy itself. Some minorities, not the Hungarian minority, but some other minorities, they have automatically a number of seats, like the Armenians, or
it's one seat for every minority that's recognized in Romania.
Something like that. So there is a bunch of 25.
16 of them.
I don't know exactly. Not just 25.
16 of them left. 16 of them are left.
16. Okay, so there's 16 MEPs. Well, not MEPs. It's not in the Senate. It's in the House of Representatives. The deputies.
Yes.
So
yes,
there's 16
only there.
deputies that literally they are always with the power, with the guys on power. Yeah.
Yes.
So if you're forming a government or you're in the parliament and you have majority, you can count on 16 more because these are minority and it's very easy to deal with them.
If I could just jump in here, and again,
But not the
make a point
Hungarian minority, all the others, all the others.
But it allow me to reveal an affiliation I have. So I work for the Federal Union of European Nationalities, which is the umbrella organization of minorities which are autochthonous, so indigenous, to, for example, Romania, but across Europe and other EU member states. And here I have to say that I must disagree on this point. From a purely democratic perspective, I would say that you were talking about representative democracy. So indeed, these communities may not have enough voters to pass, for example, the 5% threshold, indeed, as you say. However, from a participatory democracy perspective, the fact that they do have representatives allows them to participate at the highest level within Romania in politics. And I only wish to say that for historical reasons, Romania is a culturally and linguistically diverse country. Unfortunately, due to historical events, many of these communities have had a significant amount of their members exiled, deported, and as a result of that, their numbers significantly decrease. So I have to say here that I think it is a credit to Romania that it does positively discriminate in this sense, and it provides seats to minorities who can thus have their concerns represented at the member state parliament level. But again, that's just my perspective. I appreciate it.
It's a very, very fair perspective and assumption. And looking at the reasons and how it works, it says, okay, this is pretty fair, okay. But the biggest problem I have is that historically speaking, I mean, well, in the last 30 years, these minorities, they always acted as a, as a maneuver, they were a margin for maneuver. They never, this is what bothers me. They don't stand their ground, huh? It's not like you have the minority or some deputies from whatever, the minority, and they say, okay, I won't do this ever. No, they don't have, principles. It seems like whoever is in power can count on them, and this is not fair. Huh? Whatever they
the reason for that.
Even though I enjoy the discussion, I think it's quite relevant. I have to say, I mentioned it earlier that certain parties in Spain, they are pushing for making it a little bit more difficult for minority parties to get seats. This is not the topic for tonight. One of the things that I love most about doing this is that we are so passionate about our own parties and beliefs, and this can go on and on. I am personally more interested from a campaign point of view to ask you a question. What has been the message from the main parties that you've been hearing? Has it been COVID and or how the government, because it's not really a government, so how the current establishment handled the crisis? Was it about something else? Was there fake news, disinformation of any sort? I'm very curious to see if this took place in Romania, because a couple of weeks ago we had the same chat with people from Moldova, and they told us that it was a pretty nasty election back then in Moldova. So how was it in Romania?
I mean, Emilian, if you want to say the Romanian side, I can talk about that.
Well, it was a very clearly this situation, this pandemic affected a lot how the parties presented themselves, and in particular the liberals and the social democrats, they had almost the same kind of teams for developing and let's build together and stuff like this. USR Plus was almost entirely focused on anti-corruption team. So it was, their slogan was a country without corruption. And the other smaller parties, they had a very let's call it neutral approach. Most of them pro-European, like the former president and the Hungarian minority as well, which is like central right oriented. But it is almost clear that there were no teams that people say, big things that the parties really imposed. It was a very weird electoral campaign. And actually, I don't believe people really followed that much like they used to. Yeah, we're going to build hospitals, we're going to build roads, and but people heard this quite a lot of times. And out of these parties, only Your Surplus had this very simple and direct message, like no corruption, a country without corruption, which is very simple, nothing else, a country without corruption. If we don't have corruption, everything else will follow. That was the message. But the others is they're just like 4 years ago, the Social Democrats won the elections promising like 12 regional hospitals and whatever amount of thousands of kilometers of motorways and stuff like this. Well, nothing was built yet. none of the hospitals. So people got tired of these, let's build the country. And I'm not convinced that any of the strategists was inspired during this time. It was a lot of luck for those who won, the Social Democrats, and a lot of bad luck for those who lost, to be honest.
Can I just mention that since Sebastian said, let's talk about disinformation or misinformation. My favorite conspiracy theory so far in this election, I think the conspiracist-in-chief award goes to Mihai Tudose, MEP, who had a statement which I thought was sad, but at the same time, in some ways, hilarious. So there is a European Citizens Initiative called the Minorities Safe Pack Initiative, and it seeks to propose 6 legislative proposals to protect and promote cultural and linguistic diversity in the European Union, specifically related to regional and minority languages. And I posted a link in Hungarian by the Hungarian news outlet Azonnali on this. Unfortunately, I couldn't find one in English, but I hope you will trust my translation of it. He claimed that this European Citizens Initiative, which will be debated in the plenary of the European Parliament this month, quote, claims that, this is a quote, and this is, again, translated into Hungarian, so potentially the translation might be off a little bit, but I thought it was quite hilarious. It says, quote, minorities no longer have to learn the language of the state, end quote. So this is what this European Citizens Initiative wants. Now, I can tell you, and again, revealing an affiliation, that I work as a policy advisor on this. There is a 74-page document we designed. I know it in and out. There is nothing, nowhere in that document, which was presented to the European Parliament, to the European Commission, that says that. So I thought it was quite funny that this gentleman, well, I hesitate to call him that, as he has made some quite outlandish remarks in the past, has put such a topic into the debate. So yeah, I think that's the most sad, but at the same time funny conspiracy I've seen this time around.
Narcis?
Okay, from the diaspora side, it used to be in the past, social media matters a lot for us. And whatever is posted on Facebook, especially as a main medium, it's quite important. Romanians group themselves quite a lot on Romanians in every region of Europe. And they have their own little communities where they kind of influence each other in these little bubbles. The king of social media and diaspora has been dethroned. It used to be USR Plus. They used to be the best at mobilizing people and at getting their messages to them. They're not anymore. The new kings are the Gold Party. They have been very, very good at reaching out at disenfranchised Romanians who feel oppressed, who feel that they experience discrimination in other countries, and who just want to feel like their pride is given back. So they managed to reach out to these people, and they managed to reach out by building a very ethnocentrist platform. But they also managed to connect with. You have to understand that this party somehow is a creation of several different platforms. You have first the unionist platform of Giorgio Simeon, like the main figure of this party. So there's all these people who want to have a union between Romania and Republic of Moldova. Yes, so that's one thing. But then in their party, they have these very big, strong figures who, if they make a live on Facebook, they have 100,000 people watching. So I'm talking about monsters, monsters in Romanian politics. They are not politically proven. They're just orators, speakers from the street. Yes, these people have these platforms of, first of all, we do not believe there is a pandemic. Yes, there is a pretty strong canon kind of movement who is also affiliated with this party. We have people who are against all the restrictions made by the liberal government, who believe that it's all a hoax, who believe it's just about making more money for the big pharma, and who are against vaccines, who are against 5G. God, there's just so many currents of conspiracy that just united themselves. Whoever managed to bring all these people under the same house is kind of a little political genius, to be honest, because these people were so splitted, and they lacked the political talent of having leaders who will be able to bring them together, because each in itself, it might be a large community, but by itself it's not large enough to make a dent. But when you bring all these large monsters together, it becomes important. So you have all these people who kind of they agreed, okay, we will respect your conspiracy, you'll respect ours, and we all believe Romania should be great. Pretty much that's that's the understanding they have. But they're good. They're really, really good at making interesting stuff. Like, all their lives are followed by thousands of people. There's people who have very little money who are willing to donate to them. You know, they get their money from poor people. They do not have big sponsors. There is suspicion that Kremlin is also sponsoring them, obviously, because it feels like the moves they make are a bit too smart for them. But that's obviously, it could also be that the elites in Romania are looking down on the people who support this party, and they don't expect that there could be intelligence coming out from that segment of the population. So
I have to say that, I think it's really important that, when claims are made in the public arena, that there be evidence. That journalists are, of course, very important. So, as I mentioned, that quote from earlier on, like I said, this quote crossed boundaries, and a media outlet in another country fact-checked it and found it, of course, to be false. So I have to say journalists have been really important this election around. But I have to ask Narcis, what would you say? What was the most innovative tactic, technique, or tool that you saw in this election? And you mentioned one, which was that this certain politician you mentioned had a viewership of over 100,000 people, which I thought was a quite impressive figure. But was there something very unique that any of the political parties or any of the candidates did, which you would particularly bring out right now?
Well, they tried to organize a lot of resistance to whenever the government will bring out new restrictions, whenever the government will or the main leaders that talk about those restrictions on TV, on the national television, will appear publicly somewhere. They will try to have people gather there, and they will make these lives where they kind of harass them, in different ways possible. So they kind of they painted themselves as the heroes of resistance against oppression of the big world government, big pharma, and whatever else conspiracy you can find there. So they have used the power of the social media, the power of live video, to reach to people who normally wouldn't be so interested into politics. They garnished all that power, and they created enemies. So they went publicly after those people who in the mind of the simple people who are seen as responsible for these restrictions, and then they try to somehow create a fight against them. They created the fight. They were the heroes, the fighters who fight for the small people, and they are the ones who. And to be honest, that's a combination of strategy, the power of technology, and good oratoring skills. Those people who are on live, they know how to speak to the mass population. They know what kind of vocabulary to use. It's almost like they've been trained to how precisely be able to speak continuously for 1 hour, 2 hours on a language that everyone understands and everyone feels emotion when they hear it. They feel rage. They feel like everything around them is so bleak and dark, and they are willing to do anything if anyone gives them an answer, a simple answer on a language they understand. And that's what they have done. That's pretty much what they have done.
Narcis, one of the ideas behind this initiative, which was initiated by a few of us, was to fight exactly what you've said. I was scrolling down on social media earlier today with all the hashtags for the election, and I could see a lot of people sharing the MAGA hat in Romania, and just repeating, I just want Romania to be great again. That also happens in Spain. Pretty sure it happens in Hungary. You can see that. I don't think that is a coincidence. I think that there is a network of consultants, campaign people who network at the highest level. Before it was Steve Bannon, very visible with this famous movement group. I think it goes deeper than that. There is a lot of money and coordination involved. And what we wanted to do is to start thinking about what we can do as campaigners to counteract this phenomenon. And so my question would be: is it possible that I would even say progressives? I would say even I think it has to be a broader consensus, a pro-European, in the sense that believing in the fundamental values of participatory democracy, human rights, etc. Is there a way that we can do the same, that we can coordinate, that we can share techniques, that we can network between each other, so that something that worked in Romania, we implemented in the next elections coming up in Germany? It can be a message that is resonating very well. It can be anything. Do you think that is possible? How would you go about it?
First of all, I must say that in 10 minutes we need to go back in and start counting the votes. So I will have to leave you guys, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you guys. And I'm so happy to reconnect and see some of you. I'm hoping that we might get to the chance to work again. So before I go, my last thing that I will say is, well, it could pay something. It could give us some new knowledge if we study them closely, if we somehow manage to get inside this movement and try to learn as much as possible about what they have done to do, what they have, what steps they have followed. Because it's one way to look from outside and kind of think what the steps could have been that they have followed, what kind of techniques and strategies they have used. But I think getting someone who actually experienced the whole thing from inside to tell and speak about it, that could be a valuable source of information. And it could actually, we could try to see what can be replicated. Because yes, speaking to how do you get 100,000 people to follow you on a live? I mean, they create conflict. We as pro-Europeans, we are peace lovers. It's going to be difficult for us to create conflict. It'll go a bit, it's a bit easier for extremists to garner support. If we kind of want to use their techniques, we need to see how can you create conflict that kind of doesn't go against your own principles. How do you use simple language that does not, in a way, give the wrong message to the people, or because it's oversimplified, it kind of it can become also wrong information or fake news. How do you even consider using certain information that will kind of help you garner more support, even though that information might not be true? So it's easy to look at them and be like, we also want that, but it's hard to see how can we reconcile our principles and our belief in these European values with their methods. So if any political genius can take their methods and adapt them to our values, that could be that could be the rebirth of pro-European movements, you can say. But I don't see myself capable of doing that. So maybe, hopefully, someone else out there can bring something, or maybe several people can bring different small bites out of it, and together can be something. But I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think first we need to suffer and feel what that means to go, what it means to allow these extremists to gather and gain power and be united. Because once we feel what that means, I'm hoping that the silent majority, because let's not forget that more than 60% of the Romanian population does not have a political option, and they do not they do not care about what's happening in their country. So we have this large group. So I'm thinking that maybe one way to get these people to react will be to really have something so bad, like something even worse than mafia, even worse than the Social Democrats, something that will give laws that will actually inflict pain on the people, and then they will actually see what happens if you allow such people to be elected. And maybe I'm thinking then a counter movement could be born. It happened in the history before, so that could be another way. But otherwise, thank you so much for
tonight. So thank you very much, Köszönöm, for joining us. And here, if I may say, the reason why I don't particularly like the MAGA hat is because we have awesome hats in our region. You know, in Hungary we have the Csákó, in Romania we have the Tachula. So there are these great hats that we have. So we shouldn't bring in, American baseball caps. Firstly, if I may say so, I think Hungary is great, Romania is great, but we need to make our countries much, much better. So personally, I think you, Narcissus, you do quite a lot, going from country to country, sharing best practices that you see in Denmark and bringing them to Romania. So mulțumesc, köszönöm, thank you again for your engagement. And just a final comment that I see that we have so much more in common within Europe than what divides us. And here, if I could make the comment that if you look at the social media stats, in which we'll find that, for example, Facebook, the share of social media platform usage in Hungary and in Romania, according to StatCounter from Global Stat, is very similar. So in Romania, it's 94.68%, and in Hungary, it's 92.23%. So campaigns in our country online on social media are primarily conducted on Facebook. And that's just a very simple, basic statistic. But what I want to say there is, I think we can learn from one another. We should share. Thank you so much for giving us your precious time today, and good luck with counting the ballots. And I sincerely hope that the end result will be a very, very well-checked one. So I'm confident that you're going to be really looking through those ballots, Narcissus.
Thank you so much. Good evening, guys.
Good evening.
I saw a question from Sam, who's still with us, but not on the video because some connectivity issues, and he's asking about the European figures that some influenced or could influence elections in Romania, and for the legislative in particular. And it's true that Kövesi's name now is very popular because she won this seat for the new European prosecutor. So she'll play quite an important role in the future. But she's not very politically I wouldn't say biased, but I would say she's not politically active in a sense that she'll appear with different leaders or in different regions. She was never like that, in fact. That doesn't mean she doesn't have ties with political leaders. She has a lot of ties with them, but she never appears in public or makes statements. Of course, in Europe, right now she's a bit like Jeanne d'Arc. In Romania, she's a lot more. There's a lot of controversy around her. Still with a positive, I would say, majority of people have a positive opinion of her. Other people from the European level that influenced or could influence elections, there are not so many actually. The only figure that really would make the news would be Dacian Cioloș, and the new MEPs who got elected in 2019. There are very few. I would say you can count them, on a single hand. There are very few that are really known by the public. Really, because the way it works, there's a list, so people vote the list, and whoever is on the list gets a seat. So it's not like in Britain, where you have the candidate and you vote for the candidate and not for the list. So in my opinion, the MEPs actually don't influence at all the elections, the legislative elections, except for Cioloș, who's of course the leader of USR, the plus, sorry, not USR. So he's one of the leaders of the coalition, and also he's the chief of Renew. But others, no, I cannot name anyone who could, come out and say, okay, let's go out and vote and have an influence. No.
Okay, guys. So I think we need to start wrapping up, because you know that you should know, Emilian, that today is St. Nicholas Day, very special holiday for the children. And I would like to I think we've to leave it here. We've touched upon many interesting topics. To me, the most interesting one is how complicated Romanian electoral system is. Probably one of the takeaways is that people will turn out to vote when they understand who and what they are voting for. I think that might have actually impacted the low level of turnout rate, but also COVID, apathy, which is everyone's enemy. The second thing is that we see here today, we see below the latest exit poll. By the look of it, it seems that there's going to be a lot of negotiations, not a clear winner. And out of these negotiations, it is unlikely that we see PSD coming out as the winner. They will probably be outnumbered by a number of smaller parties, what we in Spain would call the coalition of losers. But it is what it is. Like parliamentary democracy, it works this way and is perfectly legitimate. And the third thing is, we've touched upon so many things that are common across Europe. We saw it in Moldova, we see it in Italy, we see it in Hungary, Poland, etc. And that is, there is a rise of populism and nationalism. They are using a very strongly emotional message, which is insert the country great again. And they just repeat it like like dozens of times. They are able to alienate, and they are able to bring together people from very different backgrounds. I think Narcis said that anti-vaccines, people who think 5G is a conspiracy to sterilize the whole human race. I mean, it's a lot of crazy stuff out of there, but there is something common, which is some people feel they are losing out in the game. They feel that there is a certain elite that is taking advantage of them, and that this is a zero-sum game in the sense that if they are losing something, it means that someone is taking their gain and laughing at them on their face. And that feeling is a very strong feeling, and it's not only shared by working class people. It is shared by older people, pensioners. It's shared by young people like us who probably we have studied, done a few masters, speak languages, and still in Spain, half of the young people are not able to find a job, and they wonder, well, I might not agree with what I'm hearing, but certainly nothing can be worse than this. So I'm gonna give it a try to these crazy parties. Maybe they will change something. And what we are probably the consequence of that is that once these parties might sound funny and crazy, but once they get into government, they have an agenda, and their agenda is all about suppressing the independence of the judiciary. It is about limiting the freedom of press. It is about going after minorities. And once you go down this path, it's very dangerous. So what we want to do and what we are trying to do with these events is let's find what unite us. Let's find what are the techniques, the strategies that are working across Europe. Let's also share excitement about an election in Romania, because the last election night that we celebrated was the US, the American election, but equally exciting can be the Romania or the Italian or the Czech. And we will continue doing that. I hope we will continue doing that. And to do it with you guys, I will leave you to make some final remarks if you want. But to me, I had a lot of fun tonight following the results of the Romanian elections. Good luck, Emilian, because this is your country, and really hope that things turn around and in a more in a better way. So I'll give you the floor, Dennis or Emilia, just to say a few words, and we can leave it here.
Emilia, please feel free to go first.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think Sebastian, he has a good analytical mind. I know that. I worked with him. He summarized it quite well. There are a lot of challenges, and it's amazing how what we've seen with happening in the United States with Make America Great Again, that somehow is being replicated as a message and strategy and techniques. Of course, it developed since, but it started from there. I just want to make a point that, well, there is some hope, but Trump lost. So personally, I would expect to see this trend, in Europe as well. But we'll see. We'll see. In some countries, definitely there will be a bigger impact. Nationalists, playing with emotions. I hear a lot about people, and Natchez was just saying in social media, people, they, messages that are touching a chord, a sensitive chord for them, and it's a bit weird because there are people who sometimes don't even know their history very well, and that's a pity. But that's also a fault of what Natchez was saying, the elites, so-called elites, sometimes. If you don't educate your people, what do you expect, in the end? So it was a bit of ignorance and I would say condescending. How is that in English? Condescendent. Sam. So it was a bit of a attitude from the elites, like
Arrogant.
arrogance, yeah, and it's, you could say it like you get to have people like this, and it doesn't come as a surprise. But I hope it won't be not just this scenario with people about condescension. Well, in English. So I hope it is not going to be like Natchez said about really going going south and experiencing the bad to bounce back. No, we don't have to do that. We have plenty of examples in history. We don't have to go there again. Huh?
Okay.
To learn about how crazy and stupid and it is to have intolerance, for example, and hatred.
So I have to agree with that. And that's, I think, a point we agree on, which is that if you consider that since 1989 we had revolutions in both Romania, in Hungary, and all over Central and Eastern Europe, I feel that the past more than 3 decades have left some people winners of these transformative processes, and others have felt left out, as Sebastian said. And here I have to agree that condescension on the part of elites who mismanaged this transformation, and an approach to voters which was very much against public participation, public scrutiny, has caused this populist backlash. And personally here I would disagree in the sense that I believe populism can be a force for good, that when you must make decisions between the interests of the populace and the elites, the majority of the population and the minority of the population, there are certain cases when it is not about minorities in the sense of ethnic or linguistic or cultural minorities, but rather minorities in the sense of oligarchs or a small group of elites who are undertaking decisions which go against the interests of the general populace. In those cases, I think that such a backlash can be a positive force for good. And as regards to the results, let's wait and see. These are only exit polls from 8 p.m. CET. I think we have to wait until tomorrow morning to fully see who will be truly the winner of the election in the sense of gaining the largest vote share. It is possible that PNL will overtake PSD. We have to see which party will have the largest vote share. But I think Sebastian is correct in the sense that it is an electorate which has not announced a clear winner gaining more than 50% plus 1 votes. Therefore, there will be, I assume, coalition negotiations. We'll have to see if these political parties will join the coalition, as Narcissus said, or if they will be rather engaging in supply arrangements in exchange for certain promises from the incoming government. And I think there's one election headquarter where I believe people are breathing a sigh of relief, and that is RMDS-UDMR. The goal of the party was to reach 5%. As we repeatedly mentioned throughout tonight, COVID and the reluctance of people to go out and vote did produce the prospect that potentially the Hungarian community in Romania, which numbers 6.1% of the population, may not turn out in great numbers. And here we can see that out of the cast votes, according to the exit poll, they got 5.7%, so 0.7% more than what was the target for this particular election campaign. And I would say that, again, perhaps the result may be a bit better or a bit worse in the morning, but definitely I think that there is a feeling of reassurance and happiness that the target was reached. So let's wait and see. Muchas gracias, Sebastian, for setting this up. Mulțumesc to both Narcissus, who is currently no longer with us, but also Elian. And I have to say that I think these chats are great. We do have another tradition, which is on every Friday at 12:30 CET. We have a so-called digital Friday lunch, where we discuss a particular topic. So I hope that those of you who are tuning in might be following us. So do like us on Facebook, do follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Check us out. And the European Campaign Playbook is always open to contributions. So if you're from Romania and you saw something that was innovative in terms of tactics, techniques, or tools, drop us a line, get in touch, and we would love to hear your input in the form of a blog article or potentially inviting you on one of our future shows. So again, köszönöm, dankeschön, mulțumesc in the major languages.
Mulțumesc.
And indeed, egészségetekre, noroc, gesundheit.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Nagy.